motion accordingly. Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'll move the agenda as presented.
Thank you very much. All those in favor? Very good. And I should also suggest that we are down, or rather short, 2 councillors thus far. I heard from both of them, and they were detained with the regular business, and councillors Hoekstra and Jacobson will be joining us, sounded like within the hour. So just in case anybody at home was wondering why we're short a couple of faces on the camera. Now you know. Our first order of business this evening is a presentation from our Lacombe Police Service. They're given an opportunity each year in the springtime to present to us their annual report. And I believe that we have waiting patiently both Chair Gish and Chief Bloomhagen. There they are on our screen so we can see you. Thank you very much for both of you. You're a couple of minutes here behind, but we have to make allowances for our public forum. We appreciate your patience. Welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy, and thanks for having us, for all council members. I know that that you have the annual report here in front of you in your package, and that you might have seen it and reviewed it already. Just between the chief and I, we thought, especially for the public who might be viewing, that we would go through our report on a fairly condensed matter, but just to refresh. So we are very pleased to be here to present our report. It's an important part of our process that we maintain this annual report and we report to the public. In my introductory letter, I spent a little bit of time just kind of refreshing all of us on the whole concept behind what the Police Commission is doing. And it's certainly an interesting and important role. And part of the reason that we have this Police Commission is because the city over a century ago chose to create its own independent police force under the Police Act. And as a result, that means that the city is required to set up the Police Commission so that we can be the independent advisor and supervisor of the chief. So our role is to ensure that our police service is in fact providing adequate and effective policing to our community. And I am quoting under the Act when I'm using the word adequate. I find, as you see in my letter, that adequate just feels like such a anticlimactic word based on what's going on out there, but adequate, I guess, is a high mark under the Solicitor General rules. So with this, the police service is mandated to provide adequate policing, which means that it needs to provide equitable police service, which means that they need to provide the community with the standard of service that it needs, but also the standard of service that it desires. So a difference between maybe Cadillac and just basic service. So that's part of the role of our commission, is to try to help the chief assess where our service should fall between those two standards. Efficient then also means that we have to consider the cost of policing. So as much as we might want policing at a certain level, there's only so much that the council will allow us to spend, and we as taxpayers also appreciate the council for that. With effective policing, it really is then a balance between the levels of service, including just the number of members and the number of civilians available, the facilities to do the work and the equipment to do the work, and then of course the standard of service, which means the skill and the knowledge and the ability of the staff. So it's a big role in this independent organization through the commission to have this police service serving the city of Lacombe. So throughout my report, I do talk a little bit just to help clarify the role that the commission is playing. And certainly it is our role to be the person who represents the interest of both the civilians, but also counsel to the chief. We are to work with the chief to help him develop yearly plans and priorities so that when we're taking a look at the idea of efficient service and the standards of service, that he has some guidelines from community members through the commission to get that done. So throughout the year, we have been quite busy. We're feeling fairly a lot very much like we're reacting to COVID, but also trying to plan and trying to adjust to the different costs and the different things that are going on. And I really feel like we've got a great group, and I do want to thank my commission colleagues who are Judy Lucht, who has been the vice chair for many years, John Walker, who retired from the commission effective December 31st in 2020, Sonia Dykeslag, Edith McKinley, Ruben Connick, who is our council representative, which we appreciate his insight, Elaine Willett-Larsen, and Brad Paris, who is our public complaints director. We also this year have added one new member, who is Cam Penstone, and I know that we'll be seeking another new member coming up for the 2022 season. The Police Commission also wants to thank the chief and all of the sworn members, as well as the civilian members of the Lacombe Police Service for doing such an amazing job this last year, given everything that we've had put in front of us. And the Police Commission, of course, wants to thank the city for all its support, including the administrative support that the city provides to us. Thank you. I'll pass it to the chief just to review the rest of the annual report, hitting the highlights.
Before you continue on, Chief Blumenhagen, I would say to Chair Gish, thank you very much both for that opening letter at the start of the report, but I think it's important that we just take a moment and make certain that members of our public understand and appreciate the fact that the commission is operated by volunteers, and we sincerely appreciate all of the work that you do. I know it's probably one of the more onerous tasks or organizations that we have in the city, and certainly is high on our importance list, and we appreciate all the work and efforts that you and your colleagues put in. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I appreciate that.
Thank you for those comments as well, Mayor Creasy. And good evening, council and city staff and anyone from the public that's joining us this evening. Just a note to Denise, who's running the slides for us this evening. My apologies that I may be running out of order with the slides as I speak, but if you scroll through as I speak, the document or the annual report is made public and is on the city website, as well as the police service website for anybody that wants to review it in its entirety. First of all, I'd like to personally thank the members of the Police Commission, Chair Corey Gish, Vice Chair Judy Lucht, John Walker, who you already know his term expired at the end of December of 2020. Sonia Dykeslag, Edith McKinley, Elaine Willett-Larsen, and Councillor Ruben Connick. Also our Public Complaints Director, Brad Paris, and welcome to Cameron Penstone in 2021. The work you do, I think it's hard to appreciate the number of hours and the dedication and commitment that each member of the commission puts into supporting and providing oversight to the police service. 2020 was the second year of our 3-year strategic plan, with priorities focused on policing excellence, recruiting and retention, reducing crime and victimization, strengthening community partnerships, and improving traffic safety. We continue to expand our capacity with our crime reduction team for serious crime and investigation. And we also had one member who was seconded to the Alberta Law Enforcement Response Team to assist with organized crime investigations and rural crime initiatives. We also created a new traffic position to focus on collision reduction strategies, and regrettably, due to resourcing issues associated to various leaves and vacancies, our community liaison position was suspended in 2020. Our authorized strength was 21 members plus the alert position. However, with some of our vacancies, we realized an actual strength of 19 sworn members, plus the alert position. LPS staffing in 2020 represented a police to population ratio of 676 to 1, which is below the national and provincial averages. However, we continue to meet all provincial standards and maintain an 82% citizen satisfaction rating. I think in 2020, that's a notable accomplishment with all the world events and the pandemic that we've all been experiencing. Through 2020, we were successful in adapting to many changes presented by COVID-19 and developing internal policies and plans while working closely with the city's management or the city's emergency management team. And thank you to all of those members for your reciprocal support as we move through a difficult year. Last year, we saw 5,254 calls for service, which was down 24% from 2019, primarily due to the pandemic. This was also 19% below the 5-year average. With these reductions, we recognize an 18% decrease in crimes against persons, 15% decrease in property crimes, 30% decrease in criminal code offenses, and 58% decrease in impaired driving offenses. We did see a 13% increase in drug offenses. However, that was primarily due to the proactive enforcement initiatives of our crime reduction team. With the legalization of marijuana, one would have expected a decrease in drug offenses. However, our focus was on chemical drugs such as fentanyl, cocaine, and methamphetamine enforcement. We did observe a 51% increase in overall provincial act occurrences. Much of this increase was due to COVID-19 related complaints and also associated with Mental Health Act calls for service and checking on the welfare of individuals. Due to the implementation of an annual crime analysis report back in 2016, we are now able to maintain 5-year comparables for our annual reports. We've seen significant improvements over the last 5 years in call answering, dispatch, and response times since the implementation of our own dispatch center in the fall of 2016. Since then, we've started analyzing our average dispatch times and our response times. 2020, our average dispatch time was 1.39 minutes with an average response time of 3.83 minutes. This far surpasses previous contracted dispatch service times where we were looking at 15 to 20 minutes for call answering.
Is now joining.
And 25 to 30 minutes for response times. Many of our efforts are recognized through the Crime Severity Index, which is completed by Stats Canada annually. We continue to maintain a very good standing with a ranking of 123 of 300 communities over 10,000 population, which hold us as one of the safest communities in Alberta. With our traffic safety initiatives, significant increases or decreases were noted in collisions at 51%. Traffic violations overall were down 49%. However, due to COVID-19 and some of the lockdowns we experienced, traffic volumes were significantly lower than normal years. With the introduction of new provincial sanctions for impaired driving, there was a decrease of 58% for criminal impaired driving offenses. However, there was changes to the enforcement and provincial sanctions that were initiated in 2020, which transferred some of those code offenses over to provincial offenses. On the item of budget, we saw minimal increases to our budget and maintained a 249 cost per capita based on a population of 14,191. Annually, we're required to report on public complaints. And overall, with the size of our community and number of occurrences we dealt with, internally, we initiated 2 internal reviews or complaints, and we received 3 complaints from the public. Of those 5, one of the internal complaints was deemed unjustified and was dealt with through operational guidance, and was dismissed, and one of the complaints was dealt with through operational guidance. Of the 3 public complaints, 2 were dismissed and 1 was dealt with through guidance. As a result of one of the complaints being dismissed, that matter was appealed to the Provincial Law Enforcement Review Board, where it was also dismissed as frivolous and vexatious. There were numerous awards and recognition, which can be reviewed in the annual report. Many of our members received Provincial Emergency Services awards, as well as long service awards. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, the volunteer work of the Lacombe Community Watch Group was suspended in 2020, and we were unable to support the summer Big Brothers, Big Sisters program, Kids and Cops, which we look forward to every year. These programs continue to be suspended in 2021. However, we look for them to be reinitiated moving forward. In addition to the commission, I'd like to thank all of our sworn members, as well as our support staff, including dispatchers, court liaison, front counter personnel, cell guards, part-time and casual staff, for their commitment to the community in delivering and supporting police services through a difficult year and providing safety to our community. I would also like to thank city staff and council for your cooperation and support throughout the year. And that is an overview of our 2020 annual report to the city, and I'm open for any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Chief Blumhagen. We appreciate that. You could, not to start on what some may perceive as a negative note, but with respect to officer complaints, as I'm sure you must realize, the mayor tends to receive calls regarding employees of every department. And I will tell you that I only received 2 negative calls about our officers. You had suggested there was perhaps 3 to lodge complaints, so that would make sense to me. I would suggest that that is an extremely low number and speaks highly to the quality of the individuals who operate in that department. So make sure and give them my thanks, and we appreciate the work that you do. Does council have any questions there with regard to the 2020 report?
I do.
Councillor Goldson, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. It's in regard to the budget. On the 6% for fine revenue, was that quite a large reduction from 2019? I would assume it was. And was there not changes to the way the provincial government gave back that fine revenue? Was it reduced to you? The amount of dollars?
Yeah, so this 6% was actually the budgeted amount. Our actual was lower than budgeted. And partly, part of the reason is after our budgets were set, the province did increase the amount of fine revenues that they were keeping, reducing our revenues, or I guess increasing the province's take from approximately 35% to 40%. My numbers might be off slightly, but that had a significant effect on our revenues. Also with the pandemic, as you know, even with municipal taxes, people were deferring payments in all areas. And we have a large amount of uncollected fine revenues that are sitting in abeyance and will remain there for up to 5 years. As to when those fines get collected will depend on when people renew their licenses or registrations and a number of other factors, but in all areas, definitely those revenues were affected.
So on that note, I mean, so there was a substantial shortfall on the budgeted side for that. I just noticed more activity lately with traffic. Seems like maybe I've just been on the road at the right times, which I like. I mean, if you're out there, that's what we want to see, I think. And we have a dedicated officer to traffic now, is that correct?
That's correct. So we did initiate a traffic services position in the fall of 2020. Much of that work for that member is focused on collision reduction initiatives or strategies, which do include enforcement. So that member is much more visible, and their primary focus would be in those high visible areas of collision reduction and enforcement throughout the city. We've also involved all of our membership when they're on patrol to ensure that any type of collision reduction strategy and enforcement is a primary focus throughout their activities. They have a number of other areas of concern, but when they do have time that's not associated to criminal investigations and other work, that they are focusing on those collision reduction initiatives that are more visible for the community.
Thank you.
Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. And thank you for coming to do this presentation to us. I always look forward to it. I only have 2 comments, actually, just sort of passing them on from comments that I've heard from the public. And one is in regards to particularly the police presence at the protests that we had in, I guess that would have been the summer, and just sort of a kudos on how that was managed, that it was low key, but it was effective. And so, you know, that is one of those situations where it can get hot really fast, and it didn't. And I would say that that was in large part to how that was handled. So that's just one bit of feedback. And then the other one was to do also with the traffic. That actually has been getting numerous comments to me about how that's appreciated, because traffic can be a significant issue in certain specific areas in town, especially for, and it's felt very strongly by a few people, and those people have definitely, you know, given me the feedback that they appreciate that there is an actual dedicated person for that, and that shows a priority of the police force. So I just want to pass that on. So thank you for that. Great.
Thank you for those comments. And with the events of the summer and the one rally anyway, but any rallies that we have experienced, as part of our strengthening community partnerships, we did meet with the organizers of those events prior to, and it really formed a relationship that I think assisted everyone in the presentation of those events and ensuring that they went smoothly and safely.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Excuse me. So when the number of members per population base is calculated, says Alberta average is 593. And no disrespect to RCMP, but that'll cover rural. Like if a detachment, for example, their municipality is paying for 16 members, but there's actually only 12 there because of members in transition of moving. Is that number based upon what number of members that municipalities pay for, or what is actually serving their community? Because then that kind of changes the perspective of what service they're receiving. I don't think other communities really know where they're at in terms of number of members and what service they're getting. And I have never heard a negative comment about our service and the levels and this, in a negative way that what we're receiving for service. I'm just saying that sometimes with the numbers at per capita, I just hear so many in the outlying areas that their municipality might be paying for 16, but only have 12. So I guess that's why I kind of wonder how the province is coming up with that number.
I believe that they do it, they calculate that number the same way as we do, although we had an authorized strength of 21 plus the one extra position in 2020. That's where that number is derived. However, we had a number of vacancies and health leaves. So we were operating with numbers lower than that in actuality, but the numbers are based on the authorized strength, not the actual strength.
One other, sorry if I might add, one other curious question is Constable Kohat got the most number of years, almost, I think he's at 48 or 49 now. Is that the most number of years served by a member across Canada yet?
Actually, there's an Edmonton Police Service member who currently has 2 years more than him with the same police service. So he doesn't get that award for being the longest serving member in Canada or Alberta, but he is close.
I think he'll stay there till he does, but
You had mentioned in your report that you had to make some tough allocation decisions regarding the community liaison officer. While I can appreciate that, I do thank you for making those tough decisions and ensuring the Safe Severe community remains at the forefront. I actually did hear from a couple of organizations as to why that may be and suggested that it was a police-related item. So I expect you got calls on them, but if it's a budget-related item, I think we can all identify with that and have to make those tough calls. So congratulations to you and the entire team at LPS. We appreciate the work that you do. I do not believe that we have any other questions, so thank you for your presentation.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Council.
Councillor Hoekstra, welcome.
Thank you.
Normally with that presentation, do we receive information at this time or?
Yes.
This would be appropriate anyway. Wouldn't you be willing to do that motion?
Anyone can make that motion. I'm more than happy to do that, to council accept the annual report for Macomb Police Commission and its information.
We didn't want to make you feel awkward, but it would be unusual for the representative for the organization not to want to make that, so thank you. Very good. Any input before we vote? All those in favor? Thanks, everyone. And as I look at our attendees that are joining us remotely, I see that Mr. Craig Teal is with us. So we will move into our public hearing. We are a couple of minutes behind, but relatively close. It's now 5:39. And I will declare that the statutory public hearing for bylaw 400.34 is now open, and that this hearing is held pursuant to sections 7, 8, 230, 692, and 606, section 2C of the MGA RSA 2000, chapter M26, and request our legislative coordinator to confirm the purpose of the public hearing, that the statutory public hearing notice was advertised, and that any written submissions received and not included in the public hearing agenda are read into the record.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy and Council. The purpose of the public hearing is to allow the general public to provide input and express their views on land use bylaw 400.34 given first reading April 26, 2021. Bylaw 400.34 proposes to amend the I-1 Light Industrial District on a specific site, Lot 19, by adding animal services on Lot 19, Block 1, Plan 1420510 as permitted use, which is located at 5372 Len Thompson Drive, as shown in the map illustrated. Public hearing notice was advertised as shown on page 34 of the agenda on our city website per the advertising bylaw, and also advertised in the Lacombe Express on May 13th and May 20th. Mayor Creasy and council, no written submissions were received, but we have one registrant for the public hearing to speak, Mr. Cole Dorr.
Thank you, Coordinator Bellavoto. We appreciate that. I'll just remind that all persons giving oral presentations this evening are to clearly state their name, and presentations are to be brief and to the point. The order of the statutory public hearing presentation will be as follows. Our development officer or designate, in this case, Mr. Teal, followed by those in favor, then those opposed, and finally any person deemed to be affected who wishes to be heard. So I will hand the floor over to our designate in this case, Mr. Craig Teal.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Good evening, members of council. The purpose of the bylaw, as already stated, is to add animal services to a set property, Lot 19, located in the Len Thompson Industrial Area. The application is in response to a request by the landowner to accommodate dog grooming facility. So focusing on basically the upkeep of the animal's appearance, not providing any medical services or overnight stays or any items that we would typically associate with a veterinarian clinic or a veterinarian hospital. Those two uses, veterinarian clinic and veterinarian hospital, are already allowable uses in the I-1 district, and adding animal services certainly won't, in our opinion, won't cause any land use conflicts with those other uses already allowed in that particular area. In this particular instance, it's one of the only building up in that particular subdivision, and we don't anticipate again any conflict with existing or future industrial light industrial uses in that area. Administration does support the proposed change to the land use bylaw, and that entails council giving second and third reading to the bylaw when we reach that point in the agenda. But with that, Mayor Creasy, I'd be happy to field any questions.
Appreciate that, Leonard Teal. Any questions thus far? Very good. Councilor Robin.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. If this business comes to the scenario where they want to kennel animals, for example, babysitting or whatever over a couple of days, does that change the zoning or does it still remain the same?
We'll pose that question to Leonard Teal. You had suggested that there was already some animal-related services that were in fact allowable in our industrial areas. So how would those items be affected?
Certainly, Mayor Creasy. So kennel is a specific defined use in the land use bylaw, and it is listed as a discretionary use in the same district, the light industrial district. So that means it could be considered, and if meets the requirements and is compatible with the area, could be approved by Municipal Planning Commission or the development officer.
Satisfied with that?
Yes, so that's my concern. So it does not come back and start a whole nother process over a slight change in that.
Very good. And so next up then, we have able to speak to those in favor. I understand that we have one individual waiting. Do they wish to speak in favor of bylaw 400.34? Someone is obviously has to manage those individuals. So who is the individual? Dave?
So Coordinator Bellavoto has been in contact.
Okay.
And
very good.
I believe that the individual has registered in opposition. Is that correct, Coordinator Bellavoto?
My understanding that he would be in favor.
Okay, then I will say it again in case the individual did not hear, that now is the time for those in favor of this bylaw to speak. So if you could just check with that individual to see if in fact they do wish to speak, I would appreciate it.
Does that individual need to be unmuted to, perhaps he's not able to from his phone? So can you just unmute him or her?
And in fact, if the individual is listening to us now, if you are trying to speak, we cannot hear you. So if the mute is initiated at your end, perhaps you could let us know when you get that figured out. So it's not from our end?
It's not from our end.
Very good. Well, we do have a set format for these, however.
Hello.
given the- Oh, saved by the bell. Hello there.
Hey, there you go. I got it figured out. Thanks.
Very good. If I could just have you state your name, and I understand you would like to speak in favor of bylaw 400.34.
Yeah, my name's Cole. I'm the property manager at Blue Collar Garage, and yeah, we look forward to having this tenant join us in the building. So yeah, definitely in favor. The dog park's nice close by, so we think it'll be a good fit.
Very good. Anything additional?
I'm sorry?
I appreciate your comments. Was there anything additional that you would like to add?
No, that should do it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Cole. We appreciate that. The time limit was not a factor. And I'm going to call one more time for anyone who wishes to speak in favor. And now I will ask for anyone who wishes to speak that is opposed to bylaw 400.34. That would be your time to speak. Do we have any indication that there's anyone else who has joined us electronically who may wish to speak on bylaw 400.34?
My understanding, Mayor Creasy, there are no other participants for this.
Very good. Just so we can say we follow the rules, and I will ask that any person deemed to be affected who wishes to be heard is now eligible to speak. And seeing none, I will declare the public hearing for bylaw 400.34, now closed at 5:48 p.m. And I think that we will move right into our request for decision. And given that we just had the public hearing on 400.34, I think it would probably be appropriate to move to item 5.2 first, if we could, and ask that Planner Teal, can we begin with 400.34, please?
Yes, Mayor Creasy. So just to reiterate, administration does support the proposed change to the light industrial district to add animal services on lot 19 and recommends that council give second reading to bylaw 400.34 as presented and third reading to bylaw 400.34 as presented.
Thank you, Planner Teal. Appreciate that. Anybody wish to speak? Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'll make that motion that council gives second reading to bylaw 400.34 as presented.
Thank you. Any comments or concerns? Well, that didn't take long, and we'll call the question then. All those in favor? Very good. And do we have appetite for the third reading this evening? Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'll move that council give third reading to bylaw 400.34 as presented.
Thank you. Last chance to speak. Anybody on this one? We're all good. All those in favor? Very good. So that is unanimously passed by 6 in attendance as well. I expect those individuals will be happy to move on with another new business for the city. Planner Teal, item 5.1, bylaw 405.2.
Is now exiting.
Planner Teal, now item 5.1, bylaw 405.2 and 400.36. The municipal development plan and land use bylaw amendments for Michener Park.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Creasy. This item places 2 bylaws on the same site before council for first reading. We're also taking opportunity in this particular RFD to give some updates stemming from council's questions at their March meeting related to parking impact and budget impacts as well on the overall project. In terms of comparison to other applications, this application is the city's or city council's as both the applicant and landowner and also the approving authority. The purpose of the 2 bylaws is to amend a portion of the Michener Park commercial site, about approximately 0.7 hectares, so just a little under 2 acres of land, from its present institutional or open space use to commercial use. So that entails making sure the land use concept in the municipal development plan shows commercial use so that the subdivision authority, if council so chooses, can approve the application. And that also follows up with the land use bylaw being consistent and using, in this particular case, the highway commercial designation, since we're along a major arterial and those kind of highway oriented or vehicle oriented uses would be most appropriate in this setting and matches the other zoning in this particular area. Given that we're dealing with the same piece of land and quite a similarity in the 2 cases, we're able to combine the 2 bylaws into a single package and hold a single public hearing for that purpose. In terms of the area that we're looking at, it is immediately to the west of 63rd Street, opposite the Petro-Canada station, and just to the east of the existing ball diamond. And that's where you'll find that approximately 0.7 hectares of land. The impact on parking is shown in, starts on page 4 in your RFD. And there's some information from the initial assessment that's been provided through review with Stantec that looks at how much parking is in the area and what the impact would be if this 0.7 hectare area, which is currently a gravel parking lot with 54 parking spaces, was converted to commercial use, how much parking stalls remain for use by the ball diamonds and other park users. Their overall estimate is that the supply of 300 plus parking stalls that would remain is very adequate for the approximate 192 parking spaces that they project would be needed if all of tournament was on and there was a lot of viewers or spectators in the temporary bleachers, assuming 6 bleachers per ball diamond and all ball diamonds in use. The question also turned to if there was the north parking lot was paved, would that make the parking more efficient? And the answer is generally yes. Converting that from a gravel area to a paved parking area with delineated stalls would probably add 44 additional parking spaces. So that would also help with the long-term projected need of 192 stalls and give a supply of 374. In terms of financial impacts, there's some update on the information that was presented to council back in March. That's at the bottom of page 5 in the RFD. And that looks at what the overall project would look like if the proceeds were largely put into paving of the parking lot to the north along the south side of Highway 12. And you can see the cost estimate for that. It does take the overall project above the anticipated budget, but there are some means that council so chose to bring that budget back down to line to achieve a net balance of 0 if some of the concrete work and other amenities for the parking lot were taken out of the budget, if that was a desire. In terms of preparing the material for council's consideration, initial public consultation was undertaken. Going through a land use bylaw amendment process and MDP amendment process, we will of course move on for additional notification and circulation if council chooses to give first reading to the bylaws. And that does lead us into the statutory public hearing at a date selected by council. That initial consultation that was undertaken involved the Lacombe District Recreation Parks and Culture Board, the Lacombe Farmers Market, Minor Ball, and also some of the landowners within the immediate area. So the preliminary consultation report is attached as attachment B to the materials to the RFD. It does raise some questions about parking, supply, the possibility of foul balls, and some ideas about other investments in the proceeds of the sale in the park amenities in this particular area. Those same groups, Mayor Creasy, would also be consulted going into the public hearing process. With that, it's recommended that council initiate the process for the planning approvals by giving first reading to bylaw 405.2 to amend the municipal development plan, and also give first reading to bylaw 400.36 to apply the highway commercial district. And given that we'd like to make sure we send a complete package and we need to have some surveyor work done prior to that time, Mayor Creasy, we're recommending that council set the public hearing date a little further back than normal at July 12th, 2021, to give us time to do that complete circulation involving subdivision land use bylaw amendment and municipal development plan amendment as well. With that, Mayor Creasy, I'd be happy to field any questions.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I was just wondering why the parking area on the far east side was not considered for parking option or the number of stalls that it could provide. Next to her, there's a parking area where you would go into the sandy dump. On page 4, on the bottom right, there's a parking area right there. Right, yeah, where you're circling right now.
Yes, I do see that. I'm not sure why that wasn't included in the analysis, but that certainly would bring the supply, overall supply up.
Perhaps it was just the proximity to the immediate parking area, I would suggest. I don't think that the overall parking allotment for the entire area was necessarily taken into account. It wasn't like that's fairly fair statement.
Yeah, when I look at that, I think it's just a matter of the proximity to the ball diamonds. Those are the ones being right central. They were seen as kind of the most likely to be used. But as Manager Teal mentioned, that would only add to the available parking, which is already exceeding the calculated requirements.
Okay. Councillor Kotick?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. My question is to process. I know we typically don't debate first reading or have much debate. I won't be voting in favor of either. So I don't know if I should be giving my reasons now or should I wait for second reading or how that works.
I think their reasons would in fact constitute debate as opposed to clarity, so that would be more appropriate for after it was brought to discussion through first reading. And in regards to that possibility of there being a first reading, Chief Cowdy, I did hear from one developer in the area who seemed to be under the impression that there may be some existing agreements for this parcel of property that would preclude us from even considering, or I think they would preclude us from considering this for commercial use. Are you aware of any such documents?
I am aware of the long-standing concern that there would be something like that. That would limit the use of this property to parkland only or restrict certain uses from that facility or from that land. We've done a thorough search of all city records, including resolutions, the land sale agreement at the time of transfer from the provincial government, as well as any legal documents attached to the property. There's been nothing that we've turned up that would indicate any sort of restrictions like that exist on this property. The only restriction that does exist is there are some limitations to the use. For example, a gas station, a service station is restricted through restrictive covenant placed by the town actually at the time of development of the petrochem site. So if this land were to be marketed, there are some, I would say, fairly minor limitations in terms of not competing with existing development. So a service station, a convenience store, things like that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I question the response from those affected, Minor Ball specifically. It says did not provide a formal response. Are in this time of COVID, are these organizations even functioning? Is there, I know there's obviously limitations because of the restrictions, but I've had a few individuals respond of concern, but I'm kind of look at the no formal response. I just, due to the limitations of COVID, is the Minor Ball on the board even functioning to give a response? Like, because if there's no ball because of COVID and limitations, are some of these boards and even functioning?
Certainly a fair question, and I think that our recreation department does keep in contact with key individuals for all of our organized sports events. However, if in fact this was to go to second reading, then it will come to a public debate anyway. So it would certainly bring it to the forefront of everyone, not just specifically targeted groups. However, we do have to rely on the fact that we do have current lists of those key individuals for these associations, and assume that they were contacted accordingly.
Yes. Now, having said that, I think you're correct. There's probably some lack of their normal operating organization that they would normally approach us. So I think there's probably a risk of that. However, they will be recontacted should this go ahead, to make sure they have ample opportunity again to provide input. And we will have that public hearing as well prior to their.
Do we have a motion before us or no?
Not to my knowledge.
Councillor Ross?
I'll make that first motion. The council give first reading to bylaw 405.2.
Thank you. Given that this is consideration for first reading, is there any items for clarification? I will call for the vote. All those in favor? Those opposed? Councillors Conic and Gullickson were both opposed, and if the record could show that clearly, I would appreciate it. So that is carried to the first reading, in fact, is carried for 405.2. Councillor Hibbs?
I'll make the next motion that council give first reading to bylaw 400.36.
And once again, same question with that. Any question, any input as to process or concern there? It is for first reading. Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? And those opposed? Councillors Conic and Gullickson were both opposed. Thanks, everyone. So those are both passed first reading. And given that was first reading, we should have some consideration for a public hearing. Councillor Hibbs?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I move that council schedule a public hearing for bylaw 405.2 and bylaw 400.36 at 5:30 p.m. on Monday, July 12th, 2021.
Very good. Does anyone have any reason why these two public hearings could not run concurrently? Very good. All those in favor? That is unanimous for the public hearing scheduling. Thank you. Next item up under request for decision is the R4 District Improvement Roadmap. Manager Hackett, could you take us through item 5.3, please?
Certainly. Good evening, Mayor Creasy and members of council. My pleasure to be here, I guess, virtually this evening to present a request for decision report related to options for a review of the R4 land use district. The R4 district is the residential mixed district in the land use bylaw. And the purpose of tonight's presentation is to briefly outline two options for council's consideration in terms of reviewing this district. So for a little bit of background, the City of Lacombe 2020 to 2022 strategic plan established a goal to support positive relationships with our neighbors. And strategy A under that goal specifically points to a review of redevelopment within the land use bylaw and possible revisions to the R4 district. Now, the R4 district allows a range of permitted and discretionary uses that range from single detached dwellings to apartments to multi-attached housing. And while the range of uses allowed within the R4 district can make it very attractive for investors or developers, at the same time, it can create some uncertainty for neighbors or surrounding homeowners who are unable to predict what type of buildings may eventually be constructed on the lot adjacent to them or near them. So a brief review of some of the concerns that have arisen in neighboring consultations for R4 uses show that the neighbors have commented on concerns such as increased traffic or parking congestion that accompany increased density, that apartment buildings are too big or infringe on the privacy of neighboring yards, or that some R4 lots are not large enough to accommodate multifamily developments, which leads to numerous variances needing to be considered. Now, it's important to note that there are over 660 separately titled parcels, R4 parcels in Lacombe, and they're spread across various areas of the city. So this is a broad issue affecting many landowners and residents. When we look to the municipal development plan for a little bit of higher planning level guidance, the MDP does discuss infill development in that it sets out a goal for Lacombe of facilitating a diverse range of housing opportunities and integrating various housing forms in all neighborhoods. However, the MDP also recognizes the need for sensitive infill. So the proposed planning review of the R4 district would need to consider this balance as set out in the MDP. That takes us to the options for review. There are two options presented in tonight's report for consideration. Option one would be an in-house led planning review and public engagement process. This would include a targeted survey to each major stakeholder group. So that would be the landowners, residents of R4 zoned property, the development community, the general public, and Municipal Planning Commission members who often are the decision makers of discretionary uses. And the survey could run through the summer, followed by a compiling of the results and analysis, and then possible land use bylaw amendments could be brought forward by early 2022. Funding required for this option is $4,000 to support developing the survey, advertising the survey, and drafting of proposed amendments that would follow. The second option, option two, is an option that would involve support from engagement consultants. And so it would also have a targeted survey to each major stakeholder group. But in addition, stakeholders would be invited to participate in some focus group discussions to more fully explore the concerns, the ideas, or the opportunities in R4 zoning improvements. Again, the survey could be open over the summer, and then focus group sessions could take place in the fall, September, October, and then possible land use bylaw amendments informed by this fuller consultation would be targeted for early 2022. Now, this option requires a little bit more funding, so approval for $19,000 to support focus group sessions, preparing the summary report of those sessions, and then bringing the drafting and the proposed amendments. So in summary, addressing redevelopment in the R4 district is identified in Lacombe's strategic plan. There are a large number of properties in the city currently zoned R4. There is a wide range of planning issues to be considered. And we have two options being presented for your consideration tonight to review the R4 zone. Administration is recommending option 2 as a more robust engagement option. And it is recommended that council endorse option 2 to review the R4 residential mixed district, including expense approval for up to $19,000 funded from the operating reserve. Thank you.
Thanks, Manager Hackett. We appreciate that. I guess the most obvious question is, with respect to the public engagement on this particular item, is this, initially I had thought that perhaps it was going to be more focused towards development-minded individuals that would want to have input for this, but is it your expectation that we could reasonably expect just many citizens at large to want to be involved? Or what is the rationale behind this more extensive process that's been outlined?
Well, thank you, Mayor Creasy. I think it, and in discussing this with my director, we think it will be of interest to both the residents, but also the development community. And so looking at the more robust option gives us an opportunity to have focus groups with both of those interests, as well as the general public who may just have some general ideas and thoughts about the zone. So it really does allow for that balance across all of the interest groups. Probably needs to be virtual consultation as opposed to in person, but we were looking at that option to have a variety of groups to be consulted with.
Fair enough. Thank you. Councillor Hibbs?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Just a question. It mentions in the report that it's 660 separately titled parcels. Do you happen to have how many residential titles there are, like, period? Like, what percentage that makes up of just residential titles in the city?
Mayor Creasy and Council, I don't know what percentage, if that's 50% or 20%, but I can find that out and bring that back to you if you'd like.
And fair enough. I think that a reasonable number would say being 8% would be a fairly close estimate, but it's certainly not. It's not more than 10%. I'll put it that way. Does that help at all, or not necessarily?
It does to some degree, but if it's not too much trouble, if there's a slightly better, even approximation, then, you know what I mean? I don't need an exact, 13.2, but yeah.
I'm happy to do that and bring that forward. I don't have it tonight, but I will get it.
Fair enough.
I think that we do have the residential tax roll fairly easily at hand, do we not?
Or not at hand here, but yes, we will get that information and get it out to you.
Easily, 600%.
I guess I'm asking because if I recall correctly, there's approximately 4,800 dwellings in town, but of course that would include, I'm assuming, separate apartments, like within an apartment building, perhaps, I don't know. And if 4,800 is approximately correct, we're looking at 14% is R4. So it's sizable. And I guess the reason I bring it up is I would make the motion that council endorse option 2 to review R4 residential mixed district, including expense approval for up to 19,000 funded from the operating reserve. Because I do feel that this is something that requires a more robust engagement process. I mean, I think that this has come to us because this is one of those reoccurring themes where it's rarely an easy process for developers to go through. It's really frustrating for them. And on the flip side, for residents, they, again, I had a call 2 weeks ago about a topic like this, and it's a reoccurring theme, and I think that maybe we can do better, and this is a way to do that. Again, like I said, this is coming up because we've all identified this as an issue, and I'd like us to say that we did our very best at addressing the situation and coming up with a solution, and that involves obviously consultation, which is going to be really hard in COVID times, hopefully better by then. But I think focus groups in particular are very useful. I mean, it sort of echoes what we did, well, not we, but what the city did when the bylaw, first came, the land use bylaw first came in and the big changes were made. And then also prior to that, previous land use plan. So I guess for something like this, which is kind of big, I'd like us to do a more robust version of consultation.
Very good. So you've made the motion. Would you like the exact number for next meeting then, or?
Well, I mean, I guess I
For
still
the
would be,
percentage one?
I guess I still would be interested in what that number
Okay.
is, because I think that
Regardless of how the vote goes, I think that the administration can have that. Of course, it's not onerous thing, so very good. With respect to the motion, anybody care to speak on it?
Thank you, Mayor Christie. I support the motion. I just, my caution with this whole looking at this zoning again, when we did, of course, a massive revision of long ago plans bylaw. And my fear, like this zoning, like many things in this community, we're never going to get it perfectly right.
No.
So I support going down this road again. Hopefully we can get to a place where most people are happy as far as that zoning goes. I don't know if that can be done, but sure, let's take another crack at it, I guess.
I too share your reservations. However, it is the right thing to do to bring it forward for people to discuss, and hopefully we have some valuable input. Councillor Goetson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I agree with Councillor Hibbs and Councillor Conick regarding this motion. I think it's really important, especially on the developer side, to ensure that when they purchase property, they understand what they can use that property for and aren't investing in something that is going to be a problem down the road. And I think that clarity will be really important to them and the citizens that live in those areas. I totally agree with this.
Anyone else? With respect to the motion for R4, does anybody care to have it read back before we vote? We're all good. Guess that means we're all good. I will call the question in. All those in favor? And I see none opposed. That's unanimous. Thanks, everyone. Next item up is bank signing authority. Chief Gowdy, item 5.4, please.
Thank you, and I apologize. I thought I would be able to find the number of properties quite quickly, but I ran into it. Not able to, so we will certainly get you that information right away. Here, of course, we're welcoming Senior Manager McKinnon with us this evening, and we would like to have her added to the what's considered your Group 1 for the signing authorities bylaw, which dictates who will be required to sign different financial expenditures of the municipality. There's two groups given there. One is administrative, one is elected officials, of course. And so here we propose to add Ms. McKinnon and delete Mr. Reyes, who of course has moved on to the town of Drumheller.
Nothing. Very good. No, I think that's fair. Kind of housekeeping as much as anything. However, we do appreciate that Senior Manager McKinnon did join us. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I'll just move that the council approve the addition of Chase McKinnon, Senior Manager of Financial Services, as a designated sign-on officer for bank constructions, forms, and legal documents.
Thank you. Anyone have anything to say? You're on the hook now. Councillor Jacobson. We are just on item 5.4, bank signing authority. Consideration the new Senior Manager McKinnon, just add her to the signing list. Okay. And I'm about to call a question, just so you know. So did you have any questions or concerns? Very good. All those in favor? And that was unanimous as well. Now that we've got your. Councillor Hodgson?
Do we not have to take our CCO off?
Sure.
List, yeah. I'll make that motion then the council approve the deletion of our CCO Reyes, previous senior manager of financial services as assignment authority.
Thank you. Appropriate for a past employee not to be on there, so I felt there's a lot of input. Very good. All those in favor? And that's unanimous as well. Thanks for keeping me on track here. Senior Manager McKinnon, are you prepared to go through the Q1 financial report, item 5.5, please?
Good evening, Mayor Creasy and members of council. Tonight, the variance report for January 1st to March 31st, 2021 is presented. Variances over $5,000 in amount are explained within the details attached. Overall, for this period, the actual revenues are lower than budget by approximately $392,000. And then actual expenses are lower than budget by approximately $623,000. The net impact is a year-to-date surplus of $230,000 for Q1 2021. We do expect to see some expenditures and savings change as there are some timing differences between budget and actuals. And so the schedule for the next variance report would be April to June. What would be presented in August 2021 and July to September and November 2021. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Although there wasn't a tremendous amount of detail in that report, I think it does suggest that we're in a favorable or reasonably favorable financial position, which is certainly good for council to be aware of as well as our citizens. So thank you for that. Any apologies for the phone up twice this evening. Things figured out here. Councillor Conick, go ahead.
I'm willing just to make a motion that council accepts this report of information.
Thank you. Anyone? Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I just did have two questions. I've highlighted them, so hopefully I can find them both. In regards to Department 21 under police, it does of course reference the fact that payment for provincial fines below projected budget for Q1. Expect this item could be under budget by 100,000 by like at year end. Obviously, I'm assuming that the police department is aware of this. I'm interested as to whether administration has any concerns about this at this time, or we're just kind of just gonna sit on it. It just, that seemed like a large number. And then I'll just scroll ahead to find the other one real quick, and then I'll cede the floor. It is, there it is. Department 43, solid waste. It mentions that recycling depot costs are higher due to more frequent pickup schedule and more bins provided. And I just wanted to ask in relation to that point, whether that's something that was kind of a sort of a one-time, like in reaction to, you know, or like more use, but now has been reduced again, or is that something that is going to be sustained going forward? So those are my two questions.
I will start with the question about Department 21. The police department is aware of the projected potential $100,000 shortfall, and in fact was the provider of that estimate of where they would be. I, at this time, can't say that I have major concerns because appropriate expense control has been used to offset the reduced revenue. And so overall, the police department actually is not a large concern for me right now. Although, of course, Q1 is the Q1. But right now, we have no reason to project a significant shortfall in that area. With respect to your question about solid waste, it's a more complicated answer. We are seeing more use there, and so we are trying to meet that demand by having more frequent collection. Some of that was definitely what we saw over the spring. Whether that will continue is Hard to know. I would say the use of the site has increased during the pandemic. I think because maybe people are shopping from home, probably because there isn't a lot of other options. So we are seeing increased use. I expect to be over by the end of the year, whether it would be 14%. I can't say for sure.
And I think that is a very interesting question to have noted that there has been a substantial increase. I mean, we're basically looking at $1,000 a day at that site for removal. And that would hold true up until currently for certain, because I believe that I just signed checks on that item today. So you're correct, there is a notable increase. As to how long that will stay or remain that way, I think that's a tough one to predict. I just hope that citizens value the fact that it is being handled in an alternate stream as to the MSW, because there is certainly a cost factor associated with it. So I hand up over here, Councillor Gullikson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Just a question regarding goods and services sold and that shortage there. Is that mostly due to our water issue?
That would be water and wastewater.
Water and wastewater issues? Okay. And that is currently being addressed, so we should see this get better? Is that correct?
You can see it not get significantly worse.
Is that better?
This kind of shortfall will not be ameliorated over time. So that what you see as a shortfall will continue. Even once the issues are corrected right through the end of the year. We should not see that shortfall continue.
Yeah. And just to that note, where are we at as far as the exchanges go? Can I ask that question here? I guess it's budget related.
Exchanges as far as
The meters go.
I would have to get the exact number, but it's a handful that are still outstanding.
Oh, okay. So we made good progress there. And that's taken care of. Good, thank you.
And while that's certainly an important factor, it is just a factor, and there is a large number of them that go into this problem, this issue. So I just don't want to mislead council into thinking because those meters are, if in fact they were 100% done, which they're not, but they're close. Even with that, that is still just one of the factors that goes into this equation. And I think that it would be unrealistic of us to expect that somehow that cost of sale discrepancy is going to magically disappear because of this one item.
Well, no, but it was approximately $50,000 a month, was it not? Somewhere in that range with the, or
that wasn't the estimate that we had come to. We're going to be looking at that now that we have those meters corrected and provide an opportunity for council to make a decision on that.
yeah.
Councillor Lucha.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. My question has to do with Department 42 wastewater and the comment around the decommissioned lagoons. So there's electrical costs for the former lagoon site. The site has now been decommissioned and the monthly costs will cease, but yet it's still anticipated that the costs will be over budget by year end. If the costs cease, why will it still be over budget?
The budget was $20,000, $692. The current year to date is $37,000. So even if the costs cease, it will over budget. $8,000.
I was looking at 64,000.
The issue there was that the city was locked to a minimum demand charge for a number of years. I want to say I get the contract potentially that extended actually a number of months, or maybe a year past the official decommissioning of the lagoons. So the city still faces demand charges, which we had not factored into our original estimate, continuing into the summer.
Any other questions with respect to the year-to-date budget report? Senior Manager McKinnon, we took it pretty easy on you this evening. Hopefully you're getting settled into your new role, and we'll be sure and come up with many more questions on the Q2 report. And would it be appropriate to receive this for information too, or is it or not?
Typically, we do receive it as information, yes.
Councillor,
Oh, yeah, I was gonna say.
did already?
I think so.
Appreciate the reminder. I'd forgotten that. So with respect to the Q1 financial report and receiving it for information, just got it on the books. All those in favor? And that is unanimous. Thank you. I believe that Director Piché is with us as well. And the next item up is 5.6, the responsible alcohol consumption in parks. Director Piché, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Before council this evening is bylaw 253.3 Parks and Facilities Bylaw Amendment. This amendment has been drafted to allow responsible liquor consumption in city parks. The changes that are being made to the bylaw is to include a section that designates the areas and the times that liquor can be consumed responsibly in certain parks. The designated areas that are being suggested are the Len Thompson Fish Pond, the Les Walker Rotary Park, the Lacombe Memorial Center Park, including Lest We Forget Park, the concession and batting cage area at Michener Park, and Crana Lake picnic area near the parking lot at Woodland Drive. The times that are suggested are from 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. daily. And in the event that someone violates the bylaw, there are suggested fines to be added to Schedule B, including consuming liquor in public at $150 and public intoxication at $250. Also to be added in the Parks and Facilities bylaw is a map that shows the specific designated areas. The municipality is responsible for posting signage that notifies the public of the designated times and the area that the liquor consumption is allowed within. There should be at least 2 signs at each area where there's entrances. The estimated cost for 10 aluminum signs that are 24 by 36 inches is approximately $1,500 to $2,000, and that's installed. That's including posts and labor. This evening, administration is requesting first and second reading of the bylaw 253.3 if council chooses to discuss or debate the bylaw. If council has any questions at this time, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Who would like to start? Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Christie. So this is permanent. This isn't just a trial period of 2021 then, I'm assuming.
Correct. The proposed bylaw amendments would be until there was a repeal or change in the bylaw.
Yeah, I don't know where I am exactly with this one. I guess I kind of support it in principle. I'm a little bit, I mean, I'm not naive to think that that doesn't already occur at some of these parks, that there's drinking. I mean, that's why you have red solo cups. I mean, it's, but at the same time, I'm just wondering about the hours a little bit. Like, I don't think I want to see somebody drinking a beer at noon, like Les Walker, or sorry, at Lest We Forget Park. Maybe I'm wrong. Like, I don't know. I'm just trying to, I guess that would be my only concern is maybe the time frame. Maybe it should be like a 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. I don't know. But I guess, yeah, music in the park occurs earlier. I mean, that's why we've designated that downtown spot, but anyways, I guess that would be my only concern is the time. Thank you.
Councillor Jacobson.
Sure. 2 things. I guess just in response to Councillor Collins' comment, I understand what you're saying. I think also that taking context, the day and the type of event. So like, yeah, having an 11 o'clock beer at Lest We Forget Park on Wednesday seems weird, but when it's a baseball tournament on Sunday, you know, at the Michener one, that's, you know, pretty normal. So I think, yeah, within that context, it's probably better to err on the side of this is just the rule. And if it passes, if there's things that come up down the road, the implementation of it, either it's rejected or amended, you know, in subsequent years. My question was just more one of, I'm curious with, and I confess, I'm not really intimately familiar with Mitchener Park. So are there grandstand areas at all for baseball games, or is it like, is there any sort of viewer area at all there, or is it just simply people stand around the edges if they're spectators at those ballparks? I'm not entirely familiar with.
So the area that's outlined there now in red basically is on either side of the concession washroom building there, it's shown in the blue.
Yeah.
One in the left, but there are certainly bleachers and viewing areas in that park other than what are indicated or included in that red zone.
So would it be then out of the jurisdiction of what the provincial laws allow to include the bleacher areas? Because that's not picnic per se. And the only reason I ask is I just, in terms of just practical use of these things, liquor consumption is allowed in the grandstands at the arena, it's allowed in, for practical purposes other places. I would think that in ballparks, you may have a much higher potential for bylaw, infractions if you confine it to just the concession area when there's ball games going on and people want to take their beverage with them to sit in the stands. Again, I could be totally off base because I'm not totally familiar with how the seating arrangements work there.
Chief Gotti?
So it comes down to the picnic area definition. The province has specifically said it's allowed within designated picnic areas of the park. So I think it would be to council whether you consider those viewing bleachers part of the picnic area. We have taken a somewhat loose interpretation, I would say, of that. When you look at, say, Les Walker Rotary Park, if you go out there right now, there's some very defined, what I would call picnic areas. They have a picnic table and a little fire pit. But the proposed allowable area for consumption goes beyond strictly that picnic area into what we would consider kind of a reasonable distance around it. Similarly, the Len Thompson fishing pond, we've said, is sitting lakeside or onside fishing really a picnic area? Not really, but we're saying that's a reasonable expectation of consumption. And we wanted to draft a bylaw for your consideration or bylaw amendments that wouldn't lead to ongoing contravention and the need for enforcement or the call for enforcement. So that's what you're balancing. I think including the bleachers will minimize the calls for enforcement by facilitating that behavior. Could that lead to liability for the municipality because it's not a picnic area? Maybe. This has never been tested out, so it's very tough to say.
Yeah, as a follow-up to that, I guess I would like to see them included if we're going to do this, only again from the perspective of someone who comes to these events, again, whether you're in town for a hockey tournament or a ball tournament or whatever. It would seem to me that it wouldn't make sense to many people, who aren't intimately familiar with the ins and outs of bylaws as to, why you could do it in the hockey stand or the hockey arena bleachers and not at the baseball park. And I do think that if we're coming at it from the perspective of mitigating, interaction with bylaw on this, I think that would be the way to go.
So just one differentiation here, when you talk about consumption, say in the bleachers at the hockey arena, that would be under an AGLC license. And so there's a defined person responsible for the behavior of patrons within that licensed area. Here, there is no license holder. AGLC is not issuing a license to someone to allow designated drinking under designated circumstances. It is actually the municipality providing a blanket approval. And so there is a little bit of a difference between the two situations, the hockey versus the baseball.
Councilor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Pertaining to Mitchener Park, that specific area I agree with, because quite often that specific area is where there would be beer gardens during a community festival or ball tournament, because the kitchen area and the restroom area is right there. Then that organizer of the event, be that they rent it, is specific to AGLC, fenced and so forth. If you open it up to all of Missioner Park, it's just going to complicate and be a huge gray area of AGLC regulations of designated areas versus non. And then you're going to have, I think, confrontations pertaining to the bylaw of extending it beyond that specific area, Missioner Park, of the rest room area and confection area. And events organizers that will hold fall tournaments, community festivals, I think then there's just too much crossover, and it's, if it's not specific like it is. I think if you expand it to the bleachers, then you're just gonna have just too much of a gray area of, I think this is better being specific to one specific area on Missioner Park. So.
Councillor Hoekstra?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I don't know about process, whether we should be passing some readings here, but I guess my question to council was, why are we doing this? I'm not opposed, but that was a question that was put to me from a citizen. And so what's our intent? And I think that we need to articulate that what our intent is with this proposal, and that we're comfortable with that before we even get into all the nitty gritty of, you know, where is the barriers that we're going to deal with there or not.
Thanks, Councillor Hoekstra. Appreciate that. So when I first reviewed this document, I was pleased to see it come forward. However, there is a few more areas in here than perhaps I would like to see us start with, given this is something new. I think that an overwhelming majority of individuals are going to see this as a responsible and positive move. However, there is a certain portion of our population that is not going to appreciate it, and I think that they ought to have places to go if they choose to. So the Les Walker Park area, I'm not necessarily sold that couldn't be reserved for or to remain as is. I do see it very positive for our downtown area around the Memorial Center. For music in the park primarily, however, it's for 7 days a week, which is fine. And I think that it's appropriate for the Len Thompson Pond area too, is seeing that as we've been working hard to try and promote it as a picnic area and a family-friendly area, and I think that is fine. Well, I appreciate Councillor Jacobson's desire to have the stands included in the ball diamonds and whatnot, the viewing areas. I just wonder if that's maybe not just a little too far to start with. I'm not opposed to it, however, I just think that it might just be too much right off the bat. I guess would like to see it proven in a few other areas and see how it is handled. And if not, we can always put more areas under this bylaw at a future date, but that's kind of where I'm at right now. So, Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I don't believe anybody has given first or asked for first readings. I would do that, and we actually are not supposed to be debating. I was under the impression. So I move that council give first reading to bylaw 253.3 Parks and Facilities Bylaw Amendment. Yeah, I would say that I do have comments, but I will say that for second reading if we go there today.
Thank you. Anyone else? We'll call the question and all those in favor of reading one. Thank you. Councillor Hoekstra.
I'll move that council give second reading of bylaw 253.8 Parks and Facilities Bylaw Amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Dawson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I also have some comments on it. Regarding Junior Park. I mean, when there's a ball diamond up there, you have alcohol consumption all over that park. When there's a ball tournament, I mean, they park wherever and they, you know, consume alcohol in the stands, like Councillor Jacobson suggested. So I would rather see us do the whole park or none of it up there. Because I think this is just gonna cause confusion and it's either the whole park or none of that part. And have it stay the same.
Councillor Jacobson?
Ironically, I would concur. I was just thinking the same thing. I think, especially, I can just think of so many scenarios on these ball tournament weekends, you know, where if you've got designated area, you know, it'd just be a bit of a nightmare for bylaw or whatever it is. If something, you know, if you get people who start to have that issue. So I would agree. I don't think it should be either all or nothing, because I think it's way too much of a confusing spot otherwise.
Councillor Hibbs?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Yeah, I would concur. That was actually my comment, is I would rather us sort of start smaller and then perhaps expand in the future. But I do see that Michener being particularly problematic. Honestly, I think that you're just setting people up to fail because it is such a small area that actually would be allowed and then the rest would be prohibited. And it just, I honestly just think that would just be a mistake. So I think that the other suggestions here are relatively, I guess they make sense for the most part. LMC in particular, I guess CRAN, I guess I have some concerns that, again, how do you really show to the public that it's this specific area and, you know, not park benches along, you know, along the way. So I guess if administration feels that they can really do a good job of defining that area, then I guess I'm okay with that, although I'm curious as to what the feedback is going to be maybe from the community. I don't have an issue with the time given. While I'm not necessarily going to choose to drink at 11 a.m., I don't think I need to be making that adulting decision for adults. So I'm okay with that just because that was brought up earlier and I just thought it was worth addressing. But I will be voting in favor of this bylaw amendment, but I definitely don't want to see third reading today. I'd like a chance for the public to get back to us on this.
Councillor Connick?
Thank you, Mayor Chrissy. I guess I'm just still struggling with the LMC a little bit. I mean, could we not say, maybe you can't say it, but Cole Memorial Central Park, including Leslie Freight Park during designated events only? Or is that not possible? I don't know. I don't know. I don't see it otherwise. To me, that's not a desirable location as far as it goes, but maybe that's, like I said, I'm just finding that out. I don't know if that's possible.
Lots of hands up, Chief Cuddy.
So we did talk about the concept of during designated events only, or specific times, different times at different parks. When we talked to the chief of police, he strongly recommended that it be uniformly applied, that enforcement of these sorts of rules, if they aren't uniform or predictable, is more difficult. So that, I believe that is an option. We considered that option. We're not recommending it, but I think you could direct it to be that way. And so we would have temporary signs that we would put up probably during events only that we designated. And then those would be taken down outside of those specific events.
Councillor Hoekstra?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I guess I'm still back to my question. What is our intent with this change? And I guess when I remember the committee meeting and the thoughts that I left the meeting with was that our intent is to facilitate happy socialization in our city, and that people can take a picnic lunch and have a beer with the picnic lunch and enjoy the beautiful surroundings of our city. And so I think we really have to answer that for ourselves, because if our intent is only to celebrate particular events or like music in the park, then we don't need all these other parks. Then we only need the one park. And I think we were trying to replicate maybe a little bit of what we experience when we travel, when we're in Europe, that you can sit in a park and you can have a beer and you can have a good lunch. And I also imagine that this could be something that could be marketed with restaurants too. Get their takeout dinner. You can get drinks with a takeout meal now, and you can go sit in one of our parks and enjoy that full meal. Having said that, there is a concern that this is a competition to the restaurants. So that's something we also have to keep in mind. But the details of this are sort of secondary to me as to why. We got to really just acknowledge what is our intent behind this.
Councilor
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Yeah, well, I was going to speak to the LMC park and the idea to go down there and go to Cilantro and Chives, get takeout, or Uglies, get takeout and come back and sit there and have your meal, just like you described. And I think that's certainly my intent for this most of the time, is to do those sorts of things and to enjoy those facilities with a takeout meal. And it's certainly pertinent now with COVID. We see a lot of it. So I think it's a good first step.
Councilor Ross?
Councilor, go first.
You did not have any questions?
I do. Sorry, I was.
The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I was just one question, I guess, for yourself, CEO Gowdy, pertaining to the process. If we're going to make amendments to, for example, not including Mitchell Park whatsoever, was that amendment would be made in the second reading or later in the third?
Currently, Councilor Hoekstra has a motion on the floor to adopt second reading as presented. You would have to explore an amendment either through friendly means, through her adoption, or through a motion to amend that motion, if you would like to change it prior to second reading. Now, there's nothing stopping council from passing second reading and then providing additional direction as to what third reading should look like. So you pass second reading and say, third reading, I want to see this park added, these hours changed, and it only be temporary. Or
well, my concern was just so that it's clear to the public what's presented. Final draft, so to speak, I guess.
My recommendation, just given where you're currently at, would be it's probably most straightforward to consider second reading as proposed by Councilor Hoekstra, and then subsequently provide any direction that you would like to see through a resolution for the third reading. Then we will prepare that third reading with that direction, make sure that any public notifications or anything of that nature references those resolved changes, and third reading would come as you directed for your consideration.
Thank you.
Councilor Jacobson.
Sure. So I just wanted to speak to Councilor Hoekstra's question, because obviously this came about because of me. Yeah. So my motivation behind this was twofold. First and foremost, this just genuinely aligns with my personal philosophy, and as a representative of the people of Macomb, I'm always, that should dictate what my decision making is. I firmly believe that, wherever possible, the government should not be in the business of policing how you choose to experience your reality, so far as that does not interfere with anybody else's. And because the province has made this little slice available, regardless of whether it passes or not, I have a philosophical reason for bringing this forward. And second of all, very much like we experienced when we were dealing with the bylaw implication of the cannabis legalization. Again, I know that this is something that exists anyway in reality to a very large degree, and all this is simply going to be doing is making the bylaw reflect that, frankly. And the one thing I would just mention too about the Mitchell Park one, again, I'm actually kind of half and half between this because I've heard really good points on either side. Again, to that point, I'm not sure if we may be making more of a problem than solving one if we make again, because again, I've never actually been to a ball tournament weekend anywhere. I just have lots of friends who have, and they tell me all about it. And apparently beer is a big part of these weekends. So again, to explicitly make it legal in other parks and not that, again, I'm not sure if we're not simply just not creating a bylaw that aligns with reality as opposed to denying that reality. So I think maybe that should be taken into consideration. But most I just want to speak to Councillor Hoekstra's request for a discussion on that.
Thank you. So it is my hope that second reading passes and the public has ample opportunity between that and any proposed third reading at a later date, so we can receive input if there's any reason why any one of these areas should not be included in the bylaw. Quite frankly, I'm more than willing to listen to that. Initially, I saw this as being a very positive thing for primarily the downtown core with the LMC area. However, I can see advantages to other areas too. So I guess in saying that, I'm certainly prepared to support the second reading. However, I'm sure that the word will get out that this is under review by us, and we will receive lots of input, which is great. And then we can make an appropriate decision for third and final reading at a later date. Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. Just so a question to the CEO. The batting cage area, or maybe Councillor Ross even spoke to this, that area can be a beer garden, right? That is an area that typically is a beer garden. So like, yes. Speak to what Councillor Jacobson's saying, you know, if you have a ball tournament, there still could be a beer garden there, even if it didn't fall under this bylaw, right? Someone could get a license and.
Yes, definitely. I think the issue that I believe you spoke of earlier, where some restaurants may see it as competition.
Right.
If I was someone who maybe traditionally ran that beer garden, I think I would be reevaluating to make sure that it was still a viable option if actually consumption of brought from home drinks is allowed throughout the park. I would think it would be much less likely that I would sell as much as I have in past years. So I think that's probably an impact, but in theory, they still could get one for sure.
And certainly in those types of events, that falls under a different set of rules outlined through Alberta Gaming Liquor Commission. Correct. Liquor Commission, yeah, right. All right. Anybody else have anything to say with respect to second reading? Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I am going to support second reading only because I want to have further discussion, but I remain having that concern about Michener. I also don't know why I didn't think of it sooner. I'm assuming that there's no prohibition, considering that the Crana Lake area would be so close to a school, or actually schools. I'm sure that's been taken into consideration and there's no conflict there, but if that hasn't been considered, then that would probably be something to look at prior to third reading.
So there is no requirement for a certain distance from schools. This is not school ground. However, obviously municipally, as municipal leaders, that is something you should consider, is to make sure that you believe it's a suitable location. You're absolutely correct. There's a number of schools in the
Anyone else? All right, we do have second reading before us. Anybody require it to be read back? And for second reading purposes, I will call for the vote. All those in favor? Those opposed? I see none. That is unanimous. Thank you. Director Piché, your items take way longer to discuss than others. Just noting that. Item 5.7, the responsible animal ownership bylaw update, please.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Before council this evening is bylaw 469.1, amendment to bylaw 469, the responsible animal ownership bylaw. It has been 2 years since we first adopted Bylaw 469, the Responsible Animal Ownership Bylaw. After working with the bylaw for that long, there have been a few changes that are now required. The areas that we're trying to focus on for this amendment are adding urban apiaries, including a clause that to not allow animals on sports fields, and making changes to the vicious animals section. Administration has had a few requests to allow urban apiaries within the city, and we have granted those. But after completing more research, it has been discovered that there are provincial regulations in place for those who keep bees, either in a rural setting or in an urban setting. Including urban apiaries in the bylaw will ensure that those wishing to be apiculturists will have to register with the province, attend proper training programs, and create disease and swarm control plans. Bylaw enforcement will ensure that each location adheres to the requirements of the provincial regulations and will, as per the Bee Act and the bylaw. The second change that is included in this amendment is to prohibit animals on sports fields. Bylaw enforcement, park staff, and administration receives many complaints each spring that sports fields are covered with excrement, animal excrement. And unless bylaw enforcement has actually a witness or sees the act themselves, it is very difficult to prove that a specific dog and owner were at fault. Making the change to not allow animals on the sports fields permits bylaw enforcement staff to educate and the public of why they're not allowed, and then also to be able to enforce. If there is a reoccurrence by the animal owners to allow their animals on the field, then bylaw staff can issue a ticket. This broadens the ability to respond when a complaint of an animal is seen, even if it is on a leash. It must be emphasized, though, that this does not include the surrounding areas, such as the sidewalks, trails leading up to the sports fields, but just specific to the actual playing fields. The last change of the amendment focuses on vicious animals. This is a process change when it comes to handling dog bite incidents. The current iteration of the bylaw does not allow for our bylaw enforcement staff to declare an animal as being dangerous. The bylaw enforcement staff are trained to be able to handle investigations, but are at present time to declare an animal as a dangerous animal, it must be done through the courts. We recommend that severe incidents still be left up to the courts. However, those that are less severe could be done internally. We plan to use the Dunbar aggression scale to determine the severity of an incident. There are also some changes to the urban hen section that you'll see within the amendment, but it's very specific to wording changes and to clean up some of the redundancies within that section. At this time, administration requests that council passes first and second reading if council wishes to debate or discuss this amendment. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hoekstra.
I move that council approves first reading of bylaw 469.1 responsible animal ownership bylaw amendment.
The process related question before we consider the vote? No? All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I think this is very long overdue. I've received a lot of complaints from soccer field area, but anyways, I will make the second motion that council approves the second reading of bylaw 469.1 responsible animal ownership bylaw amendment.
Thank you. Experience some there we go. This is Councillor Hipp, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I expect that we're going to hear a lot of negative feedback about, in particular, the animals on sports field as well, just because I do know that, like a lot of, I don't know, children's soccer games, people find that a family event and they, you know, bring Fido with them. Like it's so common for so many people that that's going to be somewhat of a problem. I guess there is the rationale there, but just be prepared that we may hear some negative about that. And then my other point is clean gone out of my mind. So I guess that's it for now. Sorry.
Fair enough. Happens to the best of us. Anyone else? Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. Just a quick follow up, but you can still bring your dog to the game, is my understanding.
Yeah.
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 So they're not allowed
On the field.
And then my comment was about why the change with the urban hen? Like why new terminology there versus, I didn't understand that part.
I'm sure there's a perfectly good reason for that. Chief Cowdy?
Chicken, what's wrong with chicken?
A chicken is a species of animal. A hen is a sex of a specific species.
So that excludes roosters then.
Oh, of course. And I'm a farm girl.
And
Now you know.
so some of the early morning noise issues that tend to around the housing of roosters.
No roosters allowed.
Councillor Hibbs?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I did not remember the second thing, but a follow-up to the first comment then. A lot of these playing fields don't really have defined areas, especially when you're talking about, like, for example, because I'm very familiar with soccer, you know, like a U6, U8, they play on a modified field, so it's not very clear. Do you know what I mean? Like the older kids play full field, you've got everybody out there. The younger kids play, you know, crossways, it's a smaller area. I'm just concerned that that's actually gonna be really confusing for people, especially when there's not actually any games set up that, you know, where is a dog allowed and not allowed? And, you know, if it's U6 playing, then the dog Fido's allowed to be in this spot, but if it's U14, now it's not able to be. And I don't know, I guess I find that slightly problematic.
Councillor, good. Actually, Chief Cowdy?
Director Piche, can you just highlight for us the definition of playing fields and sports fields, where it is and what that includes?
I think that your microphone may be on mute, Director.
I'm muted. Sorry, I apologize for that. A sports field is defined as the land within the city, controlled by the city, which is set apart for use of the playing of sport, including but not limited to baseball diamonds, field hockey, or cricket pitches, and rugby and soccer or football fields.
Councillor Clark?
Yeah, so that was my comment. I think it's actually pretty well defined. And if you go to say soccer pitch now, they outline where soccer pitch is, right?
Even over here?
Where they do, the north end?
No, like.
Well, okay, so that's another question. That's not a sports field, that's school property. Right? So that's different again.
Yes, you will not be able to enforce this on school property.
I'm thinking strictly of Michener, the north side.
Okay.
Soccer.
Thank you for bringing up that differential. That makes sense.
Yeah,
That's the one that.
Councillor Phillipson?
I was just agreeing with Councillor Hibbs that it's almost impossible to enforce this, that those soccer fields for the younger groups where they're not really defined. So now you say it cannot be enforced on the school grounds, is that correct?
Correct. The school grounds are not the city controlled or.
So what controls the dogs on school grounds?
If there's school rules about how dogs must behave on their property, then those would govern. Otherwise, the city does not have jurisdiction.
So when an owner of a dog is out there and runs their dog loose on the school grounds, we cannot go there and give them a ticket for a dog running loose, is that correct?
You can give a ticket. Whether that ticket would hold up in court if someone were to challenge it, I think would remain to be seen.
So I'm not happy that was just brought out in public. Because that is one of my biggest issues with dogs in the school grounds and running loose and not picking up. I mean, if you walk across with a leash and you pick up whatever you need to pick up, that's fine, but there are some irresponsible ones.
We forgive you for bringing it up.
Yeah.
I'm very much in agreement.
Can we delete that first?
Getting to the school division perhaps.
So, Director Piche, with respect to the wording and whatnot in the bylaw, I really have no problems with it. Did have some questions with respect to Schedule B that forms part of that bylaw for the different penalties. And I expect there might be a reason for, but I'm just curious. On section 5 there, halfway down the first page, you've got 5.3 F and G, animal attacks a person or animals, and then fines of $500 and a court appearance in the second and third offenses. And then an animal attacks a person or persons and causes severe injury with the same penalties and the same court dates. What's the need for including the one with the severe injury? Obviously there was an attack then if there's severe injury, so I'm just, there's just quite a few spots like that. I'm just curious why the extra verbiage.
Some of it is based on the actual severity of that Dunbar aggression level and such. But now that you've pointed that out, that should actually be a higher rate than just $500, I would think. Like I would say we should go to $750 at least.
That would make some sense, better sense to me if there was some differentiation between the two, but when they're the same, I think it just doesn't quite add up. And then
Absolutely.
There was also, with respect to the actual fine amounts on a nuisance animal, and I either overlooked or couldn't locate the definition of a nuisance animal. I just, at first I was thinking vicious animal, but a vicious animal is not a nuisance animal.
No.
So if in fact you have the description of a nuisance animal, that may shed some light on some of these fines. Do you have that?
Yeah, yes, in section, sorry, I don't have the full bylaw in front of me, but in section 7 is the nuisance animal definition and the explanation. So those are animals that they do excessive barking, they run at large multiple times. So the way we've done the fines for animals is that they get, for some things they get a warning first and then they get a fine, and then if they get a second fine, then it increments, and then a third fine, it increments. After the third fine for, say, running at large, that is when they're deemed as a nuisance animal, and our bylaw for enforcement staff are able to deem animals as nuisance animals that way. And so when they're deemed a nuisance animal, they change their licensing structure. They have to become annually licensed, and then they get, if they're deemed a nuisance animal, then any occurrences after that goes off of that new nuisance fine schedule.
Okay, so theoretically then an animal could already be deemed a nuisance animal prior to receiving any one of the offenses listed here on page 5. Is that right? I guess what I'm getting at.
Once they're deemed a nuisance animal, if they have an occurrence after that, then they would be fined, say if it was excessive barking, howling, then their first offense as a nuisance animal will be $650. And then if they have a second offense, it'll go up to $800, and then a third offense and subsequent will be $1,000 each.
Yeah, I can read that. I'm just suggesting then, did they not have to be guilty of one of these offenses in order to be considered a nuisance animal and then be eligible for a first offense? Because all I'm getting at here is the first offense fines are, they're large. I mean, yes. 650, 800, 800, 750. I mean.
So they would have gone through the first initial fines first. So just the standard fines in section in Schedule B. So they would be going through the 150, 300, say 600. So after that third offense, then they're going to be deemed a nuisance animal. And then they go up to these other offenses.
That makes far better sense. I'm
Okay.
thinking that for the first offense,
Yes.
someone gets a ticket because their dog defecated in public, and we're gonna deem them as a nuisance animal and a $750 fine.
No,
They've had to earn their demerits to get there.
they
Okay.
do have a lot of demerits before
Very
getting
good.
there, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, no, they go through all that, and then we actually, that is one of the changes we have made within this amendment, is increasing the nuisance fines. Previously, they were actually quite a bit lower, and it just didn't make any difference at that point. So we thought, hopefully this will deter people from keeping their dog running at large or allowing it to run at large more often.
Fair enough. So in an instance, like that one that I first went over where it was just a clerical error in the amount,
Yes.
can those types of things still be adjusted after approval of a bylaw or no? No?
But you need to approve those changes prior to third reading.
Okay, then I guess up above that one, then if we have to do it prior, 5.3 D and E, animal bites a person, animal injures a person. The fines are identical.
Okay.
Is a bite not an injury? Like why two?
No.
Oh, a dog could knock a person down and injure them as well.
I realize that.
Yeah.
Is a bite not an injury? Why,
It
why
is
is there two? So then
Yeah.
get rid of bites. Animal injures the person.
Okay.
I just want to ensure that there's purpose for each and every one of these. When it came to the chicken one, I kind of shook my head. Are we seriously gonna expect our bio officers to go out and see if the chickens each have an individual box and that their perch is 15 centimeters long?
We do have, there are standards that the chicken coops must have as part of their provincial allowances. So we do inspections on chicken coops once they're first set up, absolutely.
But the fine might be different if the pig isn't 15 centimeters long or the door isn't the right height. I mean, can't we get rid of a whole bunch of these and just say must abide by provincial guidelines? Or the fines this amount? I mean,
I will look into that and provide answers out.
I mean, fail to have water and food in the coop. I suppose that could become an animal cruelty thing, but seriously,
Yeah.
we're not gonna send our bio officers out to look for that. That's ridiculous.
Okay.
But isn't that complaint driven?
Yes, so if we were to receive a complaint, we would do an inspection to see that they're meeting the bylaw requirements.
That seems very odd because if someone is improperly looking after their dog, we're not gonna go there and look after that. If somebody's gonna phone the SPCA and go that route to look after cruelty to animals, that was what this would fall under. It just seems like we're finding ourselves a lot more work than what we need to here to be. Councilor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I just have a spelling error, 2.4A 8.2, section 8.2, in declaring an animal to be vicious rather than viscous.
Oh, sorry. Thank you.
We have no means to measure viscosity in our animal. Not problem.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I would, I guess, advise bylaw if there was a formal animal complaint, the enforcement of the SPCA would far exceed our own bylaw pertaining to the taking care of domestic animals, because they have far more rights, and that would be, I think, in the best interest of that situation if it was to animals not being taken care of. SPCA has far more power than any of our bylaws does. And I think that would be properly addressed by referring that to SPCA or taking SPCA to the complaint. And it would be, yeah, the powers of SPCA far exceed what you can do for
Keep going.
So it isn't to say that one is mutually exclusive from the other. What you have here is violations that would allow us to enforce and say you're not in compliance with the bylaw, therefore we are canceling your license, and you no longer have permission to keep, whether it's urban hens, bees within the city of Lacombe. We would still make references to SPCA or anything else, any other criminal charges or other statutes would still be enacted. But to have this clause specific to your licensing program lets you rescind those licenses when they violate them.
Okay, apologies.
Councilor Connor?
Hey, Mayor, because just addressing your concerns. I mean, I get it, but at the same time, it's not like we have 100 urban hen applications in town. We're going to have 10, 12. So, and I don't, have we ever enforced any of these, or is this all brand new? No, I mean, so I get to your point, I get it, but at the same time, it doesn't hurt to have it there, to have, have enforcement have teeth to enforce something. If there was a problem. If there was a problem, and I get your point, Mayor Christie, but at the same time, I don't see it being a huge issue that it's there.
So we're okay with failing to keep hens for personal use only? Seriously? So if somebody wants to make a commercial venture out of their 4 urban hens, then we've got a law against that? I mean, come on. And we can't slaughter an urban hen on the property. So a regular chicken we can? I mean,
Get it in your garage and nobody sees it.
I mean, this is just, it's ridiculous.
Mayor Creasy, I just got to say that a lot of this is coming from the acts, like the Urban Hen Act and such like that. So that's where a lot of these come from, how that becomes enforced. So we can take those out though, if you wish. There's no reason there.
Well, I would like to have some basis in reality for some of this stuff. It just seems ridiculous to have to include things that are absolutely so bizarre. I mean, heaven forbid we would have anybody have a 13-centimeter long chicken stick for them to perch on, and we have to fine them $100. I mean, it's just, boy. In saying that, we can have it come back for some cleanup, or we can put it through. It's up to council. I find somewhat unenforceable items like this to be offensive.
I made second or first.
Second.
Sorry.
So we don't have a motion for second?
We do.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Any additional input on the second motion before us? Being none, I will call the question. All those in favor? That is, all those opposed? I thought I missed some. That is unanimous. Lee carried, thank you. Are we wanting for some of those items to come back? Adjusted or and consider then, or put it through now? Not seen a lot of hands here, so we will move on to item 5.8, the business license program review. On to the next item, please, Director TK.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So before council this evening is a high-level review of the business license process for the city of Lacombe. The MGA grants authority to municipalities to pass a bylaw that regulates businesses within its boundaries. Many municipalities consider that the main purpose of issuing business licenses is for generating revenue and to ensure that businesses comply with zoning requirements. In the city of Lacombe, there are about 786 active business licenses as of May 2021. The business license process is a joint effort amongst multiple departments. The finance department processes annual renewals as well as all the licenses. They work with planning and development to ensure contractors and subcontractors have valid licenses. They also provide an arrears list for bylaw services for follow-up, and they estimate that they spend approximately 600 hours a year working on business license tasks. The planning and development department checks in with each contractor or sub-trade to ensure that they have a valid business license prior to issuing any permits. Whenever there is a request for a HOMOC 1, HOMOC 2, an occupancy permit, building permit, or secondary permit such as electrical or plumbing permit, these will trigger checks to see if the applicant has a valid business license. There is a process in place that does allow general contractors to confirm that all of their sub-trades have a business license ahead of time to ensure that the permitting process will flow smoothly. Bylaw enforcement will follow up with each business license on an arrears list. In 2019, there was one citation that was written in regarding a business license violation. In 2021, bylaw enforcement so far has contacted 81 resident businesses and 57 non-resident businesses who were in arrears for not having valid business licenses. The result of those calls reported that there are approximately 80 of those businesses which are no longer operating or going to work in Lacombe. Economic development has very few interactions with business license processes. However, they do utilize the information that is collected to demonstrate business attraction and retention and to ensure that businesses are provided with information regarding programs and initiatives. Before providing any support to any downtown storefront programs, a check is made to ensure that the business receiving a benefit does have a valid business license. In regards to statistics, the city budgets about $187,500 for revenue from business licenses each year. About $160,000 of that is budgeted for bylaw enforcement and $27,500 is budgeted for economic development. To date, the total amount of revenue recognized is $179,804. Table 2 does break down the residents by the non-residential, residential, and home occupation categories. As you can see, there is a larger revenue source from non-residential licensing, yet the city issues only about 30% of its licenses to non-residential businesses. I do have to admit there is a discrepancy on Table 2 for 2021. The total revenue should be $179,804, and the total number of licenses is 831. Of that 831, that does include those businesses that are no longer operating that was mentioned earlier by bylaw enforcement checking into them. The city of Lacombe has had some of the highest fees amongst the municipal comparators. Camrose and Cochrane are higher in residential licenses and home occupation licenses. However, the city of Lacombe is the highest in non-residential at $412. Council did make some suggestions at a previous meeting about the future of business license programs. However, if council does intend to do away with the program or change it to a lifetime license, administration would need to do some further investigation to find out what the full ramifications would be. There are ways to improve the program so businesses can attain more value for what is paid for a license. And some of the suggestions that came up by administration are to use the funds from the license revenue to support initiatives for programs and for initiatives and programs such as the ECHO initiatives and expanding the storefront program. Another one is to reduce red tape by exploring more customer-friendly software to make it easier for applicants to apply for permits and licenses, to optimize pricing to the median range for to our municipal competitors, or to utilize other departments to provide added services such as the fire department by conducting yearly fire inspections and pre-planning for businesses. At this point, administration is looking for direction from council should you want to choose to make any alterations to the program. If there are any questions, I'm happy to explore them at this time.
Thanks, Director Piche. Councilor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Obviously, I brought this forward, so I have some thoughts on this. I do really appreciate the memo. I thought it was very well done and very in depth. I guess an initial comment is that it's very interesting that 85% is allotted to bylaw, 15 to economic development services, when essentially bylaw is really only busy because they're keeping up with arrears accounts. And so if we were to change how we do business licenses, for example, whether it's a one-time, maybe it's every 3 years instead of every, you know what I mean, every year, like there should be ideally then a lot less demand on, on enforcement. Because honestly, like it really has to be defensible why we're charging a fee. And it honestly sounds like a lot of the fee that should be going to, I don't know, planning and development or other departments. So, I mean, I suppose you could just argue that, well, we'll just slide it from one department to another, but it's just, at least it's a lot more defensible. And I do want to compliment, I do appreciate the ideas here that we can investigate other areas to be improved. And honestly, I like probably most of them. Directly tie a portion of funds to business support programs, the red tape reduction, hallelujah. Wouldn't that be fantastic for businesses if they can sort of streamline the process? That would alleviate some of our workload here at City Hall. And man, I would think that would be a lot nicer for businesses. Optimized pricing, certainly, again, like, we don't want to be seen to be charging more for, maybe even arguing less service than you get at other communities. So that's definitely something that I would support. And then finally, they utilize the fire department staff to complete yearly. I don't know if it needs to be yearly, but again, that's a service that you're getting for having a business license, and it promotes safety within our community. So, I really appreciate these suggestions. So I guess I realize that we're not making a decision necessarily today, that we're being asked to receive this as information. But I guess I would really be saying to administration that I think this is a really good idea, and that I would like to see at some point in the future that, the ideas in this memo are strongly considered and seen as to what can be brought back to actually make the proper changes. I guess I would give that out to council as far as what their viewpoint on it is, but I honestly think that we can do a whole lot better than we are doing, and that we don't necessarily have to give up all the revenue for it. I'm not that hard line that we just need to get rid of business license fees, but it has to be more justifiable, because honestly, it just isn't at this point in time. And I don't like charging that. It feels kind of dirty, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So let's do better.
Thank you. So then when this was initially brought forward, I thought that great idea, good for businesses. Times other things are tough. And so I went to talk to several businesses, which happened to be in the Wolf Creek Business Park. And I was rather surprised at the response that I got. And all but one were very much in favor with keeping it just the way that it is. That took me by surprise when I think perhaps maybe some of them realized more than myself when I realized that out of town businesses pay around triple what local businesses do, and they felt that this was really the only mechanism there was to help garner a little bit of funds for the city. Whether or not it was to offset what they paid, they didn't really elaborate, but to basically level the playing field on businesses that, for all intents and purposes, don't really contribute to the operations of the city in any other meaningful way. So, I've kind of changed my outlook and would suggest that when we look at the column for residents here for our business licenses, we are kind of in the mid-range. Camrose, Cochrane's higher, similar to Black Falls, marginal difference. So I was surprised, and I think that our business community has an interesting viewpoint on this, given they're the ones that pay a lot of them. I think that as far as the allocation of the funds, that's kind of an arbitrary thing. I mean, that's basically goes into general revenue. It's however you want to say we're divvying the funds up, that's fine, but it's kind of pointless, to be honest with you. In saying that, I think it would be nice if we perhaps did increase the fire safety inspections. There might be some additional costs associated with it. I'm not necessarily sure what all is involved with that. But I think that, in fact, this is a source of revenue, but one that is endorsed by the people that are paying it here, that are in residents and contributing. Some would say a disproportionately high amount of taxes already that I spoke to that were in favor of it yet. So that's why I am not in favor of any dramatic changes at this particular point in time. Councilor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I would just like to make a motion that council accept the business license review as information.
Thank you. Councilor Connick.
Thank you, Mayor Chrissy. I agree with a lot of what you said. When I've had a business for 10 years, paying this fee every year wasn't my biggest invoice. I can tell you that much. I was more worried about paying the rent than it was this. And for me, it was more of a validation that I am legit, that I can operate by paying that. Now, having said that, in my 10 years, no one ever asked to see my business license, but it just kind of gives validation that, you know, you can operate in the city of Tacoma. And now, having said that, and I would argue not a little bit to Councilor Gibbs that bylaw, all they did in relation to this was, you know, collecting arrears. I phoned bylaw a few times, as you know, where you currently work, that sometimes someone would pop in front of my store for a whole day and I'd be phoning bylaw the next day because that vehicles are back and saying, hey, you just check into this, and sure enough, an employee was parking there all day and they eventually moved. So I utilized bylaw on a few occasions. So, but how the money shakes out, yeah, maybe we can look at that. I think just maybe it should go towards more business related, you know, programming or whatever the case may be. Sure, I think maybe that's something we can look at, but to do away with it altogether, that's a lot of money. And you know, where do we fill that gap again? And again, I never had an issue.
Councilor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I guess I just had questions around how come we deviated from the median, since we've sort of embraced the median of all of our comparator communities for a lot of things. So how did we deviate, or when did we deviate, or has it been historically like this? And then my other question was around home occupation businesses. I'm surprised that they pay the same as a local business. I would have guessed it was lower. That's just a comment, not necessarily asking for a change. I was just surprised.
Director Piche, how far back in history were you able to garner information on the difference in license fees from community to community?
So these are current rates from one community to the other. We didn't go back any time for that. Sorry.
These are snapshot comparing your current rates, which were adopted in 2013. Was when this bylaw was adopted. So I don't really know what the reason was. At that time, I would, if we're currently near the top, I would have guessed that 8 years ago, we would have been right at the top, but I really don't know.
Councilor Jacobson.
Sorry, question. Did we raise our business license rates from 2021 to 2020 to 2021? So how can we have less licenses and more revenue? Is that just because there's collection issues?
It's different makeup.
I think that the composition, there must have been more higher paying ones, which for the most part are businesses from outside our community.
Yeah, no, I know, but I'm looking right at it. So non-residential, 280 licenses with 83,000 revenue in 2020. You have almost 50 fewer licenses in 2021, but an additional 11,000 in revenue.
Director Piche?
That really could be down to the collection of it. In 2020, there was no follow-up for arrears due to COVID and just wanting not to put the pressure on businesses at that time back in March, April, May, of course. So we did not actually do a lot of follow-up at that in 2020.
Anyone else? Satisfied with enough debate in this item for second reading? I believe.
Information.
Second news information.
Oh, very good. I will call the question and all those in favor. Thank you. Was there any further direction required at this time?
We are fine. When a bylaw review is completed, we will definitely be bringing those considerations and changes in the future.
Thank you. Chief Buddy, did you have your chief administrative report ready?
Yes, I do. There's a tab there. I'm pleased to report that since the writing of this report, we've continued to reduce the number of active COVID-19 cases in the community to just under 70 right now. 61. 61. Oh, even better since I last. Okay. So we are continuing to hold regular meetings to look at. Actually, now it looks like we're looking at taking away some of the restrictions, which is great, rather than reacting to new restrictions. We do have, I'm sure, as you've experienced, receive frequent contact about the degree of restrictions and how they're interpreted by the city, both wanting a more strict interpretation and less strict interpretation. So we are doing what we can to sort of balance those desires. Temporary patio extension program, fortunately, is on hold because of restrictions, although we did process a number of additional applications, 3 more applications. Beyond that, I guess I would, one exciting for me, is that sewer flow monitoring for inflow and infiltration has started at the north end of the city. And so we are starting to hopefully track down where some of these additional flows are coming into the system so that over the next few years we can eliminate them and hopefully reduce some of the waste and utilities departments. And we'll be starting a similar thing. We'll be proposing a similar thing to council for the water system as well. For those losses. Beyond that, the report is there, and I would be happy to answer any questions about items on it or not.
Thank you. Councillor Hoekstra.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I was curious about the transfer of the world's largest litter. Like, where is it being transferred to?
So, similar to you would have on a subdivision development. Once the construction is certified complete, in this case, the Macomb Fish and Game Association will be transferred to the city. And that way it'll be under our liability insurance rider, and it's on city land, and so it's just more straightforward. However, there is the small matter of the city also becoming responsible for the maintenance, upkeep, and possible replacement of that item in the future. So this certainly has been anticipated since the beginning of the project, but it's not a free gift. It's one of those gifts that has some obligations there.
On the good side, it does come with its own light now, so you can enjoy it at night from the highway as well. I think the Fish and Game member saying Mr. Bob Brown actually installed an extremely bright LED light that Mike said that. So hopefully it'll be more noticeable in the evening, in the dark, even more so than during the day. Anyway, I digress, but continue.
And then the RFP for the PW construction. I'm sorry, I could not figure out what PW was. Oh, yeah, okay. I just couldn't, I was like.
Acronyms.
Yeah.
I said, like we don't have enough acronyms in the municipal world, right? No, fair enough. Councilor Hibbs?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Creasy. One question and one comment. I'll do the comment first. I know that there's going to be an announcement tomorrow as far as restrictions because it's been time. So that's tomorrow morning. So looking eagerly forward to that for sure. And then the question I have is in regards to this street sweeping. You said nearing completion. This must be much earlier than last year because I seem to remember that the last area is to be done or certainly into June. So is it just because the weather was so good we were just able to get ahead of it faster, or was it different deployment, or what's the reason for that?
On schedule breakdown last year that affected our sweeping schedule, if I recall, and we are on the 4-on-4 off schedule, so that has allowed us to we can with the equipment run the equipment more per week. Beyond that, I can't say, I guess.
I expected it was because of council's understanding and appropriate allocation of funds for a new sweeper is what you meant to say.
Absolutely. People are happy, so I'm yay for that. Let them get that out on their bikes and whatnot, safer sooner. But yeah, I just was curious if you had comments.
So the new sweeper is really cool, and you see it's not a dedicated unit. It's actually like a built-up unit on a chassis rather than a single unit, and so it is more reliable. It is a better unit. I keep pointing it out.
I think it's safe to say that it was pointed out as a priority from our citizens, and that was relayed to administration through council. So it's nice to see that that's worked out, because I've had a lot of people as well that have commented on how good the streets look. Not everywhere, but the vast majority of all have been very pleased.
And line painting happening already too. Yay.
Councilor Ross? Oh, you had your hand up.
No,
I'm sorry, Councilor Ross, go ahead.
Thank you, Tracy. I also was going to comment on the street sweeping, that it was, well done and done in a very efficient manner, and a lot of happy people out there for that. This collapsed sewer on 49 A Street downtown. Is that going to be a major project for us in that area? Or do we know yet?
It depends how you define major.
Yeah, well, we've got, is that right close to the corner then?
No, it's just right down the alley. So we're still looking at what opportunities there might be for possible relining or structural repair, but I would consider it still capital work, but relatively minor capital work. It's going to be taking place in an alley. We're going to have a huge impact to adjacent businesses or people downtown. So it is still capital work, which is always disruptive. And
is it in the lane east of 49, or is it the west side? Because is it towards Mold, or is it the other way?
More east side.
So behind Popo's and in that area?
No, you're thinking 49C. So this is actually,
three options, BBC.
By the
Right behind the fire hall, that street.
Oh, okay, that over there. Oh, all right. Okay, I'm thinking of somewhere else. Okay, so this is on the south side of 50th. Oh, okay.
I think you're thinking of more near the Hannah Seeds.
Yeah, in that area.
Any more questions with respect to the CAO report? Thanks, Chief Gowdy. We'll move on to copper mailbox. So reminder that June is Recreation and Parks Month. The proclamation there that once again, anytime a proclamation comes like that, it's unfortunate that I have to tell them that Lacombe is not actually, it's not unfortunate, it's my responsibility to inform those individuals that Lacombe does not issue proclamations. There are a lot of very wonderful causes and well-meaning individuals and groups out there, but unfortunately it is nearly impossible to please them all and issue proclamations as much as they would be requested. So I've included the mailbox anyway, but once again, we do not issue proclamations. 6.3, Commission and Board of Commission reports, starting with the Municipal Planning Commission from March 17th. Anyone have any questions or concerns of that meeting? And the certainly.
Sorry, I'm Mayor Christie. The air residents. Oh, I'm just looking for clarification on that. That was approved. Who was that with, or who about that for? Or everybody see? Particular agency.
I'm not entirely certain it was an agency.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure that it was either.
Okay.
I think that might have been a private entity.
Yeah.
Anything else? Well, with regard to the Lacombe Police Commission minutes from middle of April, Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Christie. I was just wondering if Councillor Connick could elaborate on 5.6. And that Chief Bloomhagen indicated he would discuss with Director Piche a request for additional funds. What's that about?
Oh, we were just looking for, we had, I think it was at this meeting, we knew what the allocation was going to be. And the chief was looking to see if additional funds could be had, but that did not occur.
Respect to COVID funding.
That's right.
Okay.
Most funding, most, whatever the acronym is for that.
Would. You got it? It did occur though.
No, I did. No. Chief was under the impression that more monies could be had. And I was asking about that. And I didn't think that was possible. And that turned out to be the case.
So we did allocate $100,000 additional funding.
Yeah. No, that's fine. No, it was, sorry, and just to further elaborate, under 7.1, you can see that we have an issue, not an issue, but we're hoping, well, we need to address our dispatch costs and how it needs to be upgraded. So the hope was that we could get some additional funds to do that. That is not the case, so we will deal with that otherwise.
Councillor Ross.
Thanks for that. Thank you, Mayor Christie. Question to Councillor Connick, though, why would you not update that if you're going to gain the possibility of fire department?
Oh, we are going to update.
Oh, okay, my apologies.
Yep.
They were just exploring method of finance.
Correct.
They could be updated.
Oh, because my understanding, the fire department is currently paying $36,000 a year to rid your dispatch, but now we might as well be paying police service.
That's one reason why we're
updating it.
Updating.
Right.
That's potential to do that. That
Right.
hasn't been fully explored yet.
Oh, okay.
Thank you for bringing that forward, though. Anything else? Item 6.3C, the North Red Deer River Water Services Commission meeting. Meeting minutes from March 29th. Any questions regarding there for the plan for the report of the expansion or any related items? Seeing none, we can move into reports. Councillor Hoekstra.
Report.
Councillor Ross.
No report.
Councillor Ellison. No report. Councillor Jacobson. Councillor Gibbs. Councillor
Yeah,
Carter.
I mentioned to a 20-minute report. No, I have no.
Very good. I do not have a written report. However, verbally, I think that it's appropriate that I take time to acknowledge the retirement of one of our public works employees, Mr. Rick Morrow, longtime faithful employee of the city. I think that the staff had a little get together for him on Thursday or Friday of last week, the end of last week. And after that was enjoyed by all. We certainly wish Rick and his spouse BJ all the best in their retirement, and well earned, and hope that they sincerely enjoy their time.
28 years. She retired too.
So I think that is it for information. Councillor Connacht.
Make a motion to accept information as information.
I really preferred the wording last week or last meeting, but that's okay. It's the point across.
Report, of course. No, I'm sticking with that.
There you go. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. And our minutes from our regular meeting from May 10th. Councillor Hoekstra.
I just would like to say that's a spelling correction on items for information number 2. Should say Tofield, not Tofile.
That's kind of two different things, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. But I do.
Go ahead.
Can I make a motion to
Sure.
accept the minutes as amended?
Thank you. Any other revisions? We're all good? All those in favor as amended? That's unanimous as well. Thank you. And from May 25th, Councillor Connacht, under notices of motion, would you care to enlighten us as to yours?
Thank you, Mayor Christie. So we've chatted about this a little bit before, and I would like to have a good discussion at the next meeting about bringing VLTs back. We've done a lot to support our struggling hospitality industry, specifically our restaurant industry during this time of COVID. And I think this would be one more avenue to do that, get them on the other side of this as they come out of this. Of course, not every restaurant will want to have VLTs, but a select few will. And I don't see why they couldn't, quite frank, be allowed to increase their bottom line. I know as a former business owner, I did many different things, different spread my portfolio from a Sears outlet to Culligan water distributor to water preparer to Dutch, anything I could to increase my bottom line. And that's what I'd like to see this happen with those restaurants that want to go down that road to do that. And the way I've worded it, there's 2 routes we can go. I'm more partial to outright just rescinding the bylaw as opposed to bringing it to but I leave it to the discretion of this council. But I think it's silly to me that those who play VLTs are going to the Black Falls or to the racetrack to do it, when in fact they could support our local restaurants and buy food and beverage here and do that activity if they so desire, rather than do it uptown. So I think it's high time we take a look at that, and as such, I would like to have that discussion at the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Should I read it, or do I have to read it?
So this was from May 25th, so
It's
we can, thank you. Very good. As opposed to saying current or today's, okay. Sign me. Very good, so administration, I don't know if it's you, Chief Gowdy, or Director Pichet, are we gonna have a report ready for us for next meeting outlining the possibility of either of these paths forward?
We will not. The vote for whether or not we'd like to proceed will occur, but it's just a notice tonight. And then the motion on it'll be on the June 14th. Certainly if council requests information at that time, we can bring it, and we'll have a general idea of what the process would be. I believe I've actually already shared some information with council by the RFI on what that process would look like for the rescindment of bylaw 244. As far as the inclusion of a question on the municipal election ballot, we are looking into that. I don't have the exact details, but it's not really complicated. Should council desire that, we will definitely be able to make it happen well in time for the municipal election.
And I only include that because we got rid of them that way, so maybe that's how we bring it back. My preference would be to leave this in the bylaw. That's what I put.
Thank you, Councillor Cronk. I think it's important for the public to understand that both of those avenues are available to council wish. So thank you for that. In camera, of course, we'll come to in a moment here and just review the meetings forthcoming. Just to be clear, I believe this is our final meeting in this room as it is currently configured. So bye-bye, council chambers. We will be meeting at the LMC, which room?
I think.
The room holding the council
Kinsman
meeting?
room.
Kinsman room, thank you. Appreciate that. From June 7th forward, and rather than give a specific date, we will say until conditions allow us to return here. How does that sound? So all future meetings will be located at the LMT. So Monday, June 7th is a council committee meeting of the whole at 5 p.m. Monday, June 14th is a regular council meeting at 5 p.m. And Monday, June 28th, being the month, is a regular council meeting once again, as well at 5 p.m. Is there any desire to adjust the committee meeting of the whole period? No? Very good. We can add those to our calendar. And that takes us to section 9, I believe, unless there's something that we've overlooked, or that I've overlooked, rather. Section 9. Councillor Hibbs.
I'll move us in camera. Is that what?
Thank you.